hop in today with Rev Up. We're going to cover the sales cycle and effective client communication. So here we go. If I can get it to change slides. The learning objectives for today are we're going to cover the 7 simple steps in the sales cycle, objection handling techniques, effective communication in sales, and then utilizing that DISC assessment, which is the personality profile assessment. So we'll hop right in with the 7 steps in the sales cycle. We want to make sure that we don't jump over steps. So it takes some patience to work through it. Oftentimes we want to hop right. If we look at the 7 steps, they include prospecting for leads, right? Those circles of opportunity, making the appointment, qualifying and needs analysis, the loyalty commitment, meet the needs, which is deliver and then close the transaction, contract to close, and the post-sale follow-up, which is communication and referrals. And oftentimes we want to go from the prospecting to the meet the needs and skip all the stuff in the middle. So the stuff in the middle is super important. So we'll cover all of that today and what that looks like. Without prospecting, keep in mind that the sales cycle is dead, right? If we have nobody to put into that sales cycle. And so it's also really important that as we move clients through our sales cycle, that we never forget step 1, that prospecting for leads, that we always have to make that priority. We talked about that in the time blocking class. We will talk about it over and over and over again. Later this week, we're going to cover lead generation. But we need to be continually prospecting for leads so that we continually fill our pipeline full of transactions that will continue to move through that sales cycle. Think of this sales cycle as a ladder or a staircase, right? Your prospective clients are standing down there at the bottom, and your job is to move them up the ladder or the staircase, with the top goal or the goal at the top being that closed transaction, which also means income for you, right? And we don't want to move them from the bottom to the top in that one giant step. You want to take them each step at a time, as we already talked about. And each time a prospect says yes, it's a step forward and up that ladder or staircase. Most of the time, the steps are small. So sometimes, even though there's like 7 steps in this, it might amount to a lot more steps as we move them through that process. We just have these 3 major rungs, and then there's some little ones in between. Think of these as like the landings on your staircase, right? Like sometimes there's 2 or 3 stairs, and then there's a flat spot, and then you turn and you go up a couple more stairs. So think of these as the landing, and there's steps to get to each of those landings. Each of those yeses are a micro close, right? So those micro closes lead to the major closes, just like steps lead to a landing. So here we go as we work through these steps of the sales cycle. As always, if you have questions as I move through this, feel free to interrupt me, unmute yourself, raise your hand. I am watching the chat box as well, so you can always throw that in there. So step 1, prospecting for leads, right? So we're going to look at this as the buyer's sales cycle, right? We're helping to sell them a house, not get their house sold. So buyers, there's lots of different ways to prospect for leads. There's no wrong or right way to do it. And again, as we talk about lead generation, I always say there should be 5 legs of lead generation, 2 of those being your sphere of influence and your leads from listings. And then you're going to select 3 additional legs. One of those is going to be your primary leg. 2 others you're going to be working on in the background with the goal of mastering that primary leg. We're going to create systems and processes around it. We're going to work it diligently. And once it starts producing results and we have those systems in place, then we can begin developing those systems and processes for those other legs of lead gen. If you try to bite off too many things and focus on too many areas, you will feel overwhelmed, and you will have a tendency just to quit or not master anything and then wonder why you don't have any transactions. So that's why we talk about limiting yourself on your primary lead gen activities. But here are some ways that you can lead gen for buyers. One of those is open houses. You have your sphere of influence, or that circle of opportunity. You have social media. You have for sale by owners. You have expired listings, relocation, farming, which could be geographic or demographic. And then, of course, you have paid lead services or online lead services. In addition, there is networking, mailers, referrals, internet. So there's a whole bunch of options out there. And again, there's no wrong answer for that. You may be like, Amy, I thought we were talking about buyers. Why would we talk about for sale by owners? Well, oftentimes people who are selling a house are also looking to buy a house, right? So, so we can talk with all of them. All right. So that's step one. We must prospect. I do recommend time blocking your prospecting and setting yourself up with goals, right? We talked about at one point setting yourself up with a budget and figuring out what your net income goal is for the end of the year. And then you can figure out what the average sales price is. We can add back in taxes and expenses to figure out how to get to that net. And that would put your income goal out there. Then you can take your income goal, divide it by the average number of commission for a transaction, which will tell you how many transactions you need to close. Then you want to buffer that a little bit because usually somebody doesn't have 100% close rate on transactions. And then you have to figure out how many appointments you need to lead to a transaction, right? So you can set this up well, especially if in your first year in real estate, you're really tracking your numbers. How many people did you talk to this week? How many appointments did you set, right? So if you were doing a farm, you could, how many doors did I knock? How many open doors? So we actually had conversations. Out of those conversations, did it lead to any appointments? And out of those appointments, did I get any signed agreements? And then out of those signed agreements, how many deals actually transpired and how many of those deals actually closed, right? So we want to track all of those items so that we know exactly how long and how many leads we need to prospect for in order to be successful this coming year. That being said, if you set up your lead gen time blocks and you're like, man, I know I need 3 appointments this week in order to hit my goal by the end of the year. Then if you set yourself up right with lead gen, you can give yourself permission to finish once you are done with your lead gen. So, right. So if I'm like, man, Monday, I've got 2 hours time blocked, and in those 2 hours, I booked all 3 appointments. I don't have to do my lead gen Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, unless I want to just, really truly blow it out in the park, then you could, but make sure you time block that lead gen on there so that you're always prospecting for those buyers. Any questions about prospecting for leads? Great.
No.
Thank you. Step 2 is we're going to make the appointment, right? We want to get face to face with people. We want to build rapport with them. And we want to make sure that we're meeting with the right people, right? So real estate is a contact sport. So that means that you want to get what we call belly to belly or face to face with people as soon as possible. And you also want to remember that your time is extremely valuable. So we want to make sure that we pre-qualify our leads to make sure that our clients are ready, willing, and able to make a purchase, are ready, willing, and able to sell a house. Okay. If somebody's not ready, willing, or able, one of those 3 things is missing to buy a house, let's say, then it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't meet with them. We just may want to tailor that meeting to be where they're at right now. So we may not spend the full hour going over items on our buyer presentation. We may just really sit down and explain to them the importance of connecting with a lender and give them some referrals, and then talk about, once they're in a position to purchase, then we'll go through and make sure all their questions are answered, right? So we may want to wait to go further in detail until they are ready to go. However, that being said, we still want to get that face-to-face time and that building rapport and relationship with those people, so it solidifies that they're going to use us as their agent. Okay. You want to always plug your leads into your CRM, your contact relationship manager. If you're using the free one through Realty One, that would be our One Suite. And then also we've got access to the Real Scout, where you could set them up on like a random property search when they're not quite ready. We want to keep them up to date of what's going on in the market and what's coming available, but we don't want to push too hard. So we wouldn't want to set them up with like a daily or an immediate, like something comes on the market, they get a notification for that. We wouldn't want to set them up on that if they're not ready, willing, and able to buy right now. It's just going to lead to frustration, and they're going to end up tuning those emails out. Let's see here. Some things to find out is we want to meet with those A or A+ prospects, right? We want to, those are ready, willing, and able. So those are people that are looking to buy in 30 days or less. They're ready to start the process. Okay. They're ready to get pre-approved. They don't have a lease that's going to hold them up until August. They're not going to have a baby in 2 weeks, which is going to delay their home purchase for 2 months, right? So we've got to think about what they've got going on in their lives, and then what that time frame looks like. So we want to make sure we ask those questions. Do they have a home that they need to sell? Is it currently on the market? Does it have offers in, right? Are they moving from out of the area? Are they going to be paying cash or arranging financing? If they are arranging financing, have they met with a lender yet, right? And if they haven't met with a lender, then we're going to want to make sure we make those recommendations. All first-time appointments should be set to meet at the office. Okay? It's for personal safety and protection. Okay? We love you guys, and we want you to be around for a really long time. So I know that sometimes, especially like on the Zillow team and stuff, when we have those online leads that call us because they want to see a property, sometimes our inclination is to meet them at that house and show it to them. And sometimes I also agree that that might be necessary to help build rapport. Sometimes with those online leads, it's harder to get them into the office first. So we may want to show them one property. That being said, we still are worried about your safety and protection. And so please make sure that somebody knows where you're at. If you're meeting somebody that you've never met before, bring somebody along with you so that there's strength in numbers. Okay. Bring a husband, bring a son, bring your spouse, bring a friend that you met at the coffee shop. I don't really care, but just bring somebody with you and make sure somebody knows where you're at and how long you anticipate being there. Let them know when the client shows up and let them know when the client leaves, right? So just be safe, use your brain. There are crazy people out there. Okay. I haven't ever met one, but they do exist. Okay. So we want to meet with those A or A+ prospects, those that are ready, willing, and able to buy in the next, they're ready to start the process. We would categorize them as a B, and you can tag them as this in your database. Somebody who's looking 30 days to 6 months out. And somebody would be a C client if they're looking probably more than 6 months out. Okay. Sometimes we think they're an A because they're ready, willing, and able. And then as they move through that pre-approval process, they find out that they're really closer to a C, that they've got some stuff they need to clean up on their credit. Totally okay. And then again, meeting at the office. We'll go further into the buyer presentation in our buyer month that's coming up in April. Let's see. Step 3, any questions about step 2, about making the appointment, building rapport?
No, ma'am.
Fabulous. Step 3 is we're going to qualify and that needs analysis. Right? So we're going to make sure that we follow the steps in the buyer process in order. You're going to have the buyer fill out their questionnaire, right? We want to make sure that the odds of getting paid are in our favor. I love showing properties. I just like looking at the insides of houses. I think it's fun. I think it's entertaining. The more the merrier, the weirder, the better. That being said, I don't want to just randomly take people around to houses just to spend my time doing that. I also have a family and a farm and animals, and there's other things that I also enjoy doing, and I don't like working for free. So I want to make sure that the odds are in my favor, that I'm going to get paid at the end. Okay, that means you have to be diligent. That was good. You have to be diligent in figuring out who you want to work with and when you're going to go show them properties, right? So we talked about like the Zillow leads or online leads. Like we may want to go show them one house, but I'm not going to go show them 4 or 5 houses if I haven't seen that pre-approval letter and we haven't had the conversation about whether they're ready, willing, and able. And we don't have a buyer agreement in place. Okay. Number one frustration I get from people that call me and they go, Amy, oh my gosh, I need help. I've got a buyer. I showed him all these properties. And then I found out he went and wrote an offer on one of them with somebody else. I'm going to ask, did you have a buyer, a representation, broker compensation, a BRBC form signed by that buyer? They're like, no. I'm be like, sorry, you're out of luck. There's nothing you can do about that. That buyer had no obligation to write an offer with you. Okay, so please make sure that you get those signed. You're going to meet during that consultation time, right? We're going to sit down with them once they're pre-approved, once we know what their loan amount can be, how much down payment they have, so what their purchase price is going to be. We're going to sit down with them for a consultation. We're going to further define what their must-haves are in the property. What their, that would be great things, right? Would be, what are the non-negotiables? That would be an A++ house, right? And what are the things that they absolutely do not want in a house, so that we can help further refine the houses and the time we're going to spend with that client equaling a transaction. Okay. Sometimes remember too, that as they get pre-qualified, if it takes them a while to find a house, that pre-qualification is going to have to re-happen after a time. That to make sure that they have updated income and asset documentation turned into the lender. The qualification is only good about every 30 days. They need to update those income and asset documentations. So just make sure that stay on top of that as you move along through this process. All right, step 4 is that loyalty commitment, right? Part of the sit down that we're going to have with them is we are going to get that representation document signed, the BRBC, the buyer representation and broker compensation form. Okay, you don't get paid until a closing happens, and you want to protect that. You also don't get paid if there's these companies out there offering discounted or no commission to a buyer's agent if we put them in contract on those properties and we didn't have an understanding about how commission was going to operate before we did that. The broker representation and the buyer representation and broker compensation document also explains what our duties are to the buyers, right? It's explaining to them, and that's usually the best way to explain it, is to just sit down with them and go over, here's what my duties are to you. And we're entering into an agency agreement, which means, I have a fiduciary responsibility to look out your best interests. I'm going to protect your personal information. So all of those items we're going to make sure that we cover. Okay. So that's going to be step 4, is to make sure that we get that loyalty commitment from them, that they're going to sign that representation agreement. Now, that doesn't mean somewhere down the road we decide that, hey, this isn't a good fit and we can cancel it. Any party can cancel it, but we want to make sure that we get compensated for any of the work that we did during that time where we represented them. Any questions about the loyalty commitment and getting that buyer representation signed? All right. Step 5 is we're going to meet the client's needs, right? We are going to clarify, right, through communication, what their must-haves are, right? We talked about that during the consultation period. What are their must-haves? What are their non-negotiables? What are their absolutely not in our house type things, right? We'll go over more about that as we dive into buyers. And sometimes through the home showing process, we're able to further clarify. So it's really important that as we're showing those properties to them that we think are good matches, that we ask for feedback, that we ask for clarification. What did you like about this house? What did you not like about this house? If they want to see a property that doesn't have one of their must-haves, it might be time before we even show up to that property to have another conversation with them and say, hey, so when we talked previously, you said, the house must have 3 garages, and this house that you're wanting to see only has 2. Is that going to be okay with you, or should we just skip this one, right? Because I don't want to waste my time showing properties that somebody ultimately is not going to be interested in, and I'm sure you don't as well as we don't want to waste the buyer's time. So we can always ask, right? Ask for clarification, and maybe that was not really a non-negotiable. Maybe it was just like that would make it an A+ house, right? So we want to completely, as we move through this process, we always want to be re-clarifying what the buyer's needs are. Okay. If we want, thirdly, understand, take action routinely and consistently, and communicate frequently are the other 2 things. So we want to always be communicating with them. You want to be into that 24-hour market watch. When you have buyers actively looking for properties, you want to be into that 24-hour market watch every day and saying, hey, did you see that new property that popped up on the market? I think it might meet your needs, right? So throwing those properties out there. Maybe if it's been a while since a property's, maybe they fall into one of those hard categories of properties that don't come up very often. Maybe you're going to do some work to try to generate some potential transactions through that. So maybe we're going to find other homes that match their criteria that aren't on the market and solicit and see if they are interested in selling their property. And we want to keep our buyers updated on that. We want to communicate frequently and routinely and let them know when they're going to hear from us next. So, right. So if I show them a property today, and they're like, man, yeah, we kind of like it, I'm not sure, be like, perfect, I'll touch base with you in like 3 hours and just see if you're interested in writing an offer, right? Or if it's something they're like, no, that one's not really a good match, then it may be a conversation of, perfect, there's nothing else right now that we haven't seen that matches your criteria, so I'll continue to watch the market, you'll continue to get alerts, and if nothing else, I'll touch base with you, whatever 3 days from today is. If it was on a Saturday or Sunday, you may be like, hey, I'll touch base with you on Wednesday, just let you know kind of where we're at and if there's any new properties that I think will match, just so that they know what to expect from us, that they never feel like we're dropping the ball, that when Monday happens and when they don't get a phone call from us because there's nothing available, they're not disappointed in our communication, that they know that, oh, she said she'd touch base on Wednesday if nothing popped up before then, right? So we always want to be communicating and setting those expectations. Okay. One of the really easy scripts that you can use is, hey, Lonnie, this is Amy from Realty One Group Fox, just following up to let you know that I'm here for you. There's nothing new to report yet, and I didn't want you to think that I'd forgotten about you. I'm just touching bases with you today. Did you have any questions for me, right? Super simple and easy. Just, hey, I'm touching base. Do you have any questions? There's nothing new on the market, right? So just super simple. By communicating frequently, right? When we go to a restaurant, and our food's delayed, right? We order our food and it's not coming, and our server like just ignores us. It makes us frustrated at the server, even though it's not the server's fault that our food's not coming out, right? So the same thing happens. If the server would just stop by our table and say, hey, I just checked in with the kitchen, your food's not quite ready yet, they're working on it, right? And just follows up with us, it makes the experience a lot better experience, even if it still takes the same amount of time for the food to come out. And the same thing happens with your clients, right? Their experience is going to be tailored by the way that you communicate with them. Any questions about step 5, meeting the client's needs?
No, ma'am.
Fabulous. Step 6 is we are going to close the transaction, right? Once we find that property, we put an offer in, we want to make sure we get from that contract to close. So we want to make sure that we educate every client that we work with, that we make sure they don't have questions, that they make sure they understand the process, that they walk them through step by step. I don't typically reiterate over and over and over again that to make sure that they know that I don't get paid until it's closing, because then I feel like they're trying to make us, like they feel like I'm forcing them into a closing. I just want them to be happy. So I just continually check in with them and make sure that they're feel confident with the transaction as it moves forward. You're going to walk them through those steps from acceptance to close. And again, it comes down to communication. Okay. With anything inside of real estate or our client focused, it's all about communication and setting those expectations. During my buyer presentation, way back on like step 2, maybe it was step 3, I talk with them about the fact that, hey, once we enter in the contract, we're going to have reports and inspections done. If there's something that comes up that might be a deal breaker for you, it would make you want to cancel that transaction, then we can ask the seller to repair those items, those big ticket items that would make you want to cancel, right? I've set that expectation that, hey, we're not going to ask for every little nick and cranny to get fixed. We're just asking for those major things that are going to be deal breakers, so that when we move into the transaction, we have those reports and inspections done. Then I can ask, hey, was there anything that got uncovered in those inspections that was a deal breaker for you, right? And they've already heard that term. They already know where I'm headed with that. They'd be like, no, there's not. They're like, perfect, great, let's move forward, right? Or it may be a conversation of, well, there's some little things, because we can always throw a repair request out there for some little things. They may not approve it, but it never hurts to ask, right? We're just setting those expectations. So always continue as you move through the process to set the expectations. Also, as we move through that process, the first 2 weeks are really busy. We've got the lender asking for things, title companies asking for things, good faith deposits going in, inspections. And then we move into like the last 2 weeks of escrow, and it gets really quiet, and there's not as much to touch base with on, because we're just waiting for underwriting to finish. We're just waiting for the timeline to finish so we can actually close on the transaction. So again, setting those expectations of when you're going to communicate with them, the next check-in, the next meeting, what the next step is, will help set you up for success. Okay, I highly recommend following a checklist. And I also recommend hiring a transaction coordinator to help you with all the stuff on the back end of the transaction, all the paperwork and the communication with the other agent, and usually their transaction coordinator. That being said, I want you all to be familiar with how to utilize the systems and how to send something out for signatures, how to utilize SkySlope, how to upload things in there, because if anything ever happened with your transaction coordinator, I don't want you to be dead in the water. So I usually recommend waiting until like your second or third transaction to bring on that transaction coordinator. Any questions about step 6, the contract to close?
No.
Alrighty. Step 7 would be your post-sale follow-up. This is even more important than the transaction itself. Okay, maybe not more important, because the transaction is super important. That's what gets you paid. That's what creates raving fans with your clients, right? Which is what we want. But the post-sale follow-up is going to help lead to repeat and referral business. It will help to generate business for you, even when you're not lead generating. So that's the key, right? So after the sale has closed, you can give them a thank you gift. Keep in mind and talk with your tax professional what the tax ramifications are, or the write-off ability of those thank you gifts are. If it's branded, just so you know, generally speaking, it counts as marketing, not a gift. So you've got some more leadway there. Things that are long lasting, right? Like a gift certificate to a restaurant is great, but they use it, they eat the food, and then they are done with it and they forget about you. So we want things that are going to remind them of you. Maybe like a welcome mat that says, welcome to the Garcias. Maybe a branded Cutco knife set that they're going to use every time they chop their veggies, right? Something like that that's going to stick around for the long haul. I also recommend that you don't drop off the thank you gift until 2 weeks to a month after the close of escrow. They get keys at the close of escrow. They're super excited about their keys. A couple weeks down the road, it gives you a chance to revisit them, drop off another gift, check in with them, and see how the house is treating them, right? You're going to ask for referrals during and after that transaction. Who else can I help? Who else do you know that are looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate? You're going to ask for feedback, right? How did I do? What went well? What do you think I could improve on? Get feedback from them. Once you get that feedback, they're like, man, you did such a great job. You communicated all the time. This was a great experience. Be like, great. Do you mind leaving me a review? Right? You could still ask for things that you could do to improve, but always ask for those reviews. You want to collect reviews on like Zillow, on Realtor, on your Yelp page, on your Google business page, right? Anywhere people are going to visit, you could get reviews. Still ask for that feedback. How did I do? What could I improve upon, right? How can I make that experience better? And then you're going to launch a follow-up plan in your CRM to stay in touch with a regular touch program, right? So monthly newsletters, set them up on a monthly neighborhood market update inside of Real Scout, put their home anniversary date in your CRM so you remember to send out a card to say, happy home anniversary. Your goal, once you put them into that CRM at the close of escrow, is they're going to move to a systematic communication where you're going to be connecting with them at least 36 times a year. Okay, you're going to have the goal would be that you'd be connecting with them 4 times a year with a phone call. That would be once a quarter. You're going to send out a monthly newsletter. That would be 12. So now we're at 12, 16. You're going to send out 12 more touches of a monthly neighborhood market update with their current and new neighborhood. So that's another 12 touches. So now we're at 28. And then you'll want to send out a couple of cards, right? Home anniversary, maybe a birthday, maybe a holiday card. Ultimately, you want to send kind of 4 things in the mail, and then you want to do 2 like tangible pop by type items. And you can either send those in the mail or drop them off on their doorstep, something like a magnetic calendar, a pen, or I don't know, something cool that they're going to utilize. I like pop buys because they're fun. They're usually like holiday oriented of some sort. So just some fun things there. So to work, and then you may want to invite them to 1 or 2 events on an annual basis to get to at least a minimum of 36 touches. Okay. Anybody have questions about that follow-up plan or the post-sale follow-up, step 7?
Amy, yes.
Yes.
So the feedback, the situation.
Yeah.
So I had a few people write me cards and write stuff in there, about the transaction.
Uh-huh.
But they filled out, sorry, I'm not on camera because I'm not feeling good today. But anyways, the Google and the realtor, all the ones that they did, I got emails saying that they did them, but they don't show up. And so I just kind of gave up on that. I was like, forget it. No, I'm not gonna, but I'm like, is there another, way? Or, I mean, I see people put it on their website where they just put little a little, feedback from clients or whatever and write their name and stuff, but I don't know.
So it's always better if you can get it from a legit site and then either screenshot it to put it on your website or whatnot.
Yeah.
There is the Rate My Agent or whatever it is through the Realty One Zone login that you can do, but there is a fee associated with that. So that I wouldn't recommend that necessarily, but it should show up. If you go on and you send them like, hey, can you leave me feedback on Zillow? And you actually go to your Zillow page. So you should claim your Zillow page and then actually share the link with them to make sure it goes to the right place, then that might be helpful, because that way you make sure they're leaving a review for you and not a review for like Realty One Group.
Yeah, that's what
So
I
it could have been
did.
something like that. So
yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I went it shows it emails me, then, and it says so and so left you a Google, and then it shows you a review, but then it's like to click on your views, or even if I go Google myself, it says no reviews, even on Zillow, nothing. So I'm like, I don't know.
So you may want to follow up with whoever sent the email, whether it was Zillow or Realtor or Google or whatever, and say, hey, I'm having problems locating where to find this reviews. Like if I was a consumer, they usually have a customer service desk that could help you find those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll try to do that later. Just thought, I wonder, somebody else has heard of it.
I don't know. Most of mine have shown up right away, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, somebody else did tell me too. I don't remember who I was talking to. Well, it's a while ago. And they said that there's some of theirs do not come either. They filter them out or something.
Yeah, sometimes they do filter them out, like on Yelp and stuff, especially. It's kind of a randomized process, but usually when you only got 1 or 2.
I'm like, I only got a few. Can I have them, please? I only got a handful. Can I keep them?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so call and ask them. They might be able to help you.
Okay.
Effective client communication, right? Sales is all about relationship building. So we always want to build rapport, and we always want to ask questions and listen. Okay. So this is why, salespeople get a bad rap, because they have money breath and they're all about let's go get a house. Let's go get a house. Let's go get a house, instead of really building rapport and finding out what they're looking for in a house and what their time frame look like. And sometimes that means encouraging them that maybe now is not the time to buy a house, right? Or now's not the time to sell their house. Building that rapport and having that relationship is super important. So just make sure that you always put that first, and that keep in control of the situation, keep in control of the relationship by always asking questions and making sure that you listen to those answers. Okay. Way more beneficial than talking at them the whole time. Let's see here. It says you were given 1 mouth and 2 eyes and 2 ears, right? Make sure you listen and pay attention. It's twice as important to listen and observe than it is to talk. Sales professional often fear that they'll lose control unless they do the talking, right? But the opposite is true, that you stay in control by asking questions and listening to their answers. right? So we always want to be in control, and we can always redirect it by asking questions. Okay. You want to make sure you listen carefully to what is said and think about what your next question is going to be. And it should pertain, it oftentimes helps to reiterate what was just communicated to you when re-asking the next question. And then you want to make sure you watch their eyes, their facial expressions, and their body language. I have talked people out of making offers on houses, right? They walk into the house and you can tell it's not the house for them. It is not their favorite house. And they're like, yeah, I guess we'll write an offer. And you're like, well, it was missing some of your key features. Are you sure you want to write an offer on this house? Like, they're like, well, yeah, but we drug you around to like so many houses so far. I just feel like we may need to make a choice, right? So it's always like, no, it's not about me. Like, I don't have to live in this house. I'll show you as many houses as it takes to find the right one, but this one's not it. So let's keep looking, right? So it's okay to have that communication and ask those questions and make sure you understand where they're coming from. Some ways to keep the ball bouncing are statements like, tell me more about that. What does that look like? Or what does that feel like to you? We're trying to ask questions that aren't yes or no questions. We're trying to ask open-ended questions. Why is that important to you? Right? Somebody's like, man, I really want a 3-car garage. You can say, why is that important to you? Right? And they may be like, well, because we've got 2 cars and they just generally don't fit in like a regular 2-car garage. It's just too tight, right? And it may be like, okay, well, now we could look for like an oversized 2-car garage or a 3-car garage. Or maybe you find out, whatever it might be, that they want a home gym. And they're going to turn that 3rd-car garage into that home gym. So you could also look for houses that already have like an extra bedroom or something where they could utilize that same space appropriately. So, right. So why is that important to you? And then what else, right? So that would be another question that you could ask is what else? So tell me more about that. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Why is that important to you? And what else? Okay. Once you're clear on your prospect's needs, wants, dreams, objectives, you can ask for the sale. Or in our case, it might be minor closes, right? It might be those soft closes, like, shall we pencil this out and see what it looks like on paper, right? So if you go see a house and they're like, man, I think this is the one, you could be like, well, should we pencil this out and see what it looks like on paper, right? That's a little less like commitment based than let's go write an offer, right? Let us move to the paperwork that allows me to represent you. Are you ready to get started, right? Just some questions that help move them towards that closed sale. You want to make sure to investigate and inquire. So when communicating, especially when handling objections, use 4 steps, right? So that like instant success doesn't always occur overnight, right? So with practice, you're going to notice the results, right? So most objections, if not all objections, are going to be fear-based, right? It's the fear of not knowing what comes next, the fear of losing control, the fear of losing money, right? What does that look like? And the first objection is almost never the actual objection, right? We had this recently where we had a client that, I can't even think of what the original objection was, and it was one of the newer agents in our office. And I kept saying, well, dig further, because chances are that's not the problem. Like what they're saying the problem isn't the problem. And there might be something else going on. And sure enough, she dug and dug and dug. And then it turned out that there had been like a recent death in the family, and they just couldn't focus on buying a house. Like they wanted to go look at houses and they wanted to move forward with purchasing a house, but their brain wasn't in it. Their heart wasn't in it at the time. And so it was like, well, let's take a month or take a couple of weeks to kind of recuperate, allow you to do what you need to do with your deceased parent. And then we can come back to this in a couple of weeks, right? So figuring out what that real objection is, what is the real concern? Okay. A lot of times too, so that step 1 would be that investigate, inquire when it comes to communication. Sometimes too, it's just they don't understand what the next step is. We haven't done a good enough job at clarifying what the next steps look like. And so we just need to go back and revisit that with them so that they feel confident that they know what's going to happen next. Your step 2 is going to be validation, right? This doesn't mean that you agree. When you validate something, when you have that validation, it's not agreement. It's just demonstrating that you've listened to them and you've heard, right? Their perspective is valid to them. So they may be way off the mark, right? They may not even understand, like they may be so far in left field, it doesn't matter. But you, in order to change that thinking and to help them understand what is really going to happen, then you have to gain their trust. Okay. So you want to make sure that you validate whatever it is that they say so that they know that you've heard them and that you understand them. It's going to create safety. It's going to help to lower that shield, right? And then also make sure that you exercise that muscle of patience. Sometimes to get through these objections, it takes time and it takes patience and it takes coming down to their level. And you may be like, well, I've closed 5 houses and I know how it works. Well, they don't, right? So we need to get them to where you're at. If we don't have trust, we don't have closing and we don't have a sale, right? And we don't want to always jump straight into education without that validation portion. Okay. Some ways to validate somebody is some opening phrases are things like, oh, I see, or I hear you. It is scary when you move through the home buying process, right? Or I felt that way too when I was in a similar situation, right? I probably would have the same concern if I were in your shoes. And before I got into real estate, I felt the same way, right? Just some opening phrases that you can use to validate their thoughts and feelings, to let them know that you hear, understand, create that safety, and help them to feel open to continuing to share and being open to what else it is that you have to say. That will move you into the third step of communication, which is going to be education. Okay. It's all about timing. So remember, we're not going to jump straight from, oh, I've got this concern, to education. We're going to validate it in the middle. You're going to gain their confidence. You're going to gain their trust. And then that way you can introduce the educational piece to let them know what really is going to happen or how it really works, right? They are adults. Keep in mind, these people that we're working with are adults. We need to make sure we treat them that way. So we need to treat them with respect. That will help create that win-win scenario. And sometimes it helps to ask for permission, right? We're going to validate their feelings and then we're going to ask for permission. I have some information that will help. May I share it with you? Or I can show you a better way. Would you like to hear it? Do you mind if I walk you through what the next steps would look like? Right? Ask for permission, because that gets them to buy in, and then they've given you their permission to walk through that educational piece. Okay, this is a good process to practice with your accountability partner, this communication piece, where somebody voices an objection, you're going to validate it, you're going to walk them through the education piece, and then we're going to move to step 4, which is the close. Okay, don't forget the close. Don't forget to ask for it, right? You can't lose what you don't have to begin with, and you're going to ask for the agreement. Okay. This is another thing that people they forget to ask for. They get hesitant. They don't want to ask for like referrals, right? After the close of escrow, same thing. Ask for it. Right. So some things that you could do to ask for the close is, does that make sense? Are you ready to get started? Are you ready to work together now? Are you ready to move forward? Does that handle your concern? Shall we move to the paperwork now? Right? Just some really easy ways to move into a soft close. If we can get people saying yes to things, then we move to the actual close. Then they're already in the habit of saying yes, right? So if we're asking, hey, does that make sense? Are you ready to get started? Should we move towards the paperwork now, right? They've already been like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'd like to get started. Yeah, let's move to the paperwork, right? They've already said yes, yes. So when we ask for the paperwork, they're ready to sign it and be done. Okay, soft closes, ask for the yes. When we ask for yes, when we ask these questions and we're asking for that close, our body language is also going to resemble what we want their answer to be. So we're always going to, when we ask the question, we're going to shake our head yes, right? Which is going to help just subconsciously help them to say the word yes. Okay, any questions about those 4 steps of communication? Okay, the last thing that I will talk about today is this personality profiling, personality types. Different people communicate and hear things in different ways. I'm sure everybody's experienced this, significant others, family members, parents, siblings, kids. They all communicate differently. Okay. So usually we call this like a disc relationship, right? That walks you through the different things. And so we have this grid, which is formal. The top is task oriented. The side is flows with. The left side, I'm not good with left and right, is structured. And the bottom is informal or more relationship oriented, right? So if you think of if you have a piece of paper, you can do this in person, but you're going to draw this X, and somewhere on the line, you can't choose the middle dot. You would choose how close you are. Are you more formal or task oriented, right? Or are you more informal or relationship based, right? Or, and then you could move, am I more structured or do I more flow with go with the flow, right? When plans change, how upset do I get? When I go on vacation, do I have an itinerary before I leave? Or do we just plan it as we go? Right? Structured on the left, flow with the right, informal at the bottom, right? It's all about relationships, friendlies versus tasks at the top. The formal, so it divides it into 4 quadrants. Most people aren't like, I'm on the dot. You've got to flow into something. So you've got the controller or the director, which is your upper left-hand quadrant. They like to be in control. Okay. You're going to take charge. They're going to start assigning the task. Your promoter or your socializer, also structured, but more informal, relationship based. That promoter is going to be, let's have a party. Okay. If we move to the right, then we have the supporter or the relator. They're more relationship based and more go with the flow. They're more, how can I help and what do you need me to do? And if we move into the upper right quadrants, they're more formal, task oriented, but also goes with the flow. Those are the analyzers or the thinkers. They open up the spreadsheet and start creating a checklist of things to do. Okay. If we can identify, I do recommend spending more time on these and kind of diving into how each of these communicates, how they hear things, and how they like to be communicated to. Because if you can identify where your clients fall on the spectrum, it will better. That was good. It will create a better relationship between you and the client and allow you to have a deeper connection because you will learn how to communicate based on their communication style. Okay, this also comes in with when we meet with people, we want to mirror and match. So if somebody's talking slowly, we want to slow our speech down and talk at the same pace as them versus somebody's talking fast, we want to speed it up and have that same conversation with them. So we're matching that speed and that the force at which they're speaking, right? Are they soft and calm or directing, right? If they're standing there with their arms crossed, like match that body language. And then slowly, as you begin that conversation, start taking your hands down. They will often take their hands down as well. It helps to disarm them. If they're shaking their head or if they're sitting forward on their chair, like do the same thing because it helps them to relate to you. Okay. People like to do business with people they can relate to. So figuring out where somebody sits, are they an analyzer and a thinker? Do they like spreadsheets? Do they want to read through the entire purchase agreement? Or they are a controller and a director, and they would just like you to get to the point and show them where to sign, right? Or are they the supporter and relator, and they really want to make sure that you understand exactly where it is and what they need in a house and why they're looking to buy a house and how their mom bought a house 3 years ago and she had a fabulous experience, but your aunt also bought a house, 4 years ago, and that was a horrible experience, and here's why, right? So those supporter relators, they want to have more conversation and really flush it out and make sure that you understand how they're feeling, right? The promoter and socializer, they just want to have fun. So just make sure it's fun, right? So if we can understand that, then we can cater each presentation and each time we interact with them to be on their level and to be at their style to build those relationships. Any questions about learning that personality type or mirroring and matching? All right. This is the eyeball here. This is the controller or the director. They need to see it. They speak rapidly. They think others are too slow. They're going to share first, and they see that you were there. Right? This is going to be the auditory. Oh, this was not. So sorry, this was a visual learner. Sorry, we moved from the learning the personality types to audio versus visual learner, right? Does somebody need to see something versus hear it? So if they're a visual learner, they need to see it. They speak rapidly. They think others are too slow and stupid. They want to share first, and they see that you're there, right? They're visual. So for somebody that's a visual learner or a visual person, we would want to change the way that we communicate with them, right? So if there's a home that they wanted to see, we would have to say, there's a home that I'm sure you would like to see, right? This home is on a beautiful neighborhood and it's very picturesque, right? We're going to describe this house to them so they can visually picture it. Even the doorbell has unique design. You'll certainly see for yourself that the rooms appear large and have the right colors. If you go to the balcony, you can see some really nice scenery. I'm sure you'll see it as an excellent choice. Right? See how we describe that house so they can visually see it. If it's somebody that's an auditory, they need to hear it. They're going to cock their head, tap their foot, snap their fingers. They're going to speak in a moderate pace, neither too fast or too slow, but steady. They're usually going to share second, and they want to be heard. Okay, so you would describe the same house to them as, yet there is another home that I'm sure you would like to hear about, right? See how we're going to hear about this home versus see this home? The home is in a quaint neighborhood and it is very sound construction. Even the doorbell has a nice tone. You'll certainly say to yourself that the rooms are large and have the right tones, right? The right paint colors, tones. If you go to the balcony, you can hear the birds chirping and the sound of the breeze. I'm sure you'll tell yourself that this is an excellent choice. See how we took the same house and we changed the description for somebody that was visual versus auditory, right? So figure out how that person sees. Somebody who's like visual, they may want a checklist to go around to the houses with them, right? So they can visually see and remember or pictures of that house, right? The 1-page client report so that they can see each house and remember the details of the houses. Kinesthetic, this would be touch, right? So we have see, hear, and touch. Somebody who is kinesthetic needs to touch it with their hands. They need to feel it. They're going to speak more slowly. They often think others are too fast or too quick. They often share last, and they want to feel connected, right? So we want to feel heard, and visual was they see that you are there. Audible would be wants to be heard, and kinesthetic is they wants to feel connected. So the same way we would describe that home to them would be, there's one more home that I'm sure you will find satisfying. The third home is in a warm neighborhood and is very solidly built. Even the doorbell gives a warm, welcome feeling. You'll certainly sense that the rooms are spacious and have the touch. If you go to the balcony, you can feel the warm sun and the light breeze. I'm sure that you'll feel this is an excellent choice, right? Again, we're describing it using things that are going to appeal to the buyer. Any questions about the audio, the learning styles, the visual, auditory, or kinesthetic?
I think we need a 12-unit class about that.
We do. You could do a whole series on this,
gosh.
on the personality styles, and on communicating appropriately. I agree. Any other questions? All right. As always, we can wrap up. Make sure you're doing your one habit on a daily basis. If nothing else, make those 3 phone calls, right? Have 3 conversations about real estate, add 3 people to your database, and write 6 notes. Probably those same 3 people you had a conversation with and added to your database. You can send them note cards and say, thank you so much for connecting with me, right? Super simple, one habit that you can do on a daily basis that will help to grow your business. If you want to move forward faster, just double these numbers or triple them, right? So you can move as fast or as slow as you want to in this business because it is your business. Does anybody have questions before we wrap up for the day on the material that we covered or anything in general? No? Everybody's good? Fabulous. Thank you for joining me today. Abby put in the chat box the link to log your attendance for today. We'd really appreciate it if you would do that. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. And we'll see you I think we're gonna join tomorrow. So tomorrow we're talking about lead generation. I'd think really hard about that. Lead generation tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow at 11.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.